background to today's book goes back to 2015, really, and the incredible success that Think Engineer had, not just in the year up to the IS in Edinburgh, but subsequently in Edinburgh, where Think Engineer went down so well. John came back to the council and started talking about, well, look, we really should be doing a bit more on this. Simon's, if you look at the cameras now, Simon is showing the where, showing the original up in there on the screen. And it was kind of, I think we all thought it was a good idea. There's no doubt it's a good idea, but I think it caught us aware, slightly unaware, just how damn good it was and well it was received. So a couple of years later in 2017, John came to us on the council back then and said, look, I think I've got an idea for a range of books. And by the way, I think we've got an opportunity to be the foremost publisher of systems engineering material, certainly in the UK. And if we leap forward to today, we are probably that, and probably that in Europe too. And I'll tell you why. Because aside from the Trinity book, which we'll talk about in a minute, 2021, apart from all the nightmares that are going on around us and the closing of the pubs, which I think is an absolute tragedy, of course, we've got 3 books being published this year. Sorry, the 3 books already publishing. There's 1 close to release, 3 are in the planning. So by the end of this year, the Don't Panic series will have 7 books. And we're going to talk about Trinity. Trinity marks the start of another direction for us, and moving more into the advanced stages, a little bit of a risk. And so we kind of thought about it and said, right, well, we'll stick with a concept that we think will resonate with people, that we think, and then following on the success of this, and we think it's going to be successful, we think we've got a whole new series of books, and we'll be reaching out to all the authors that have worked with us previously to look at their ideas for this new advanced series. So this advanced series is the next step. It's the new challenge to taking us way beyond and into the sort of 10s of books or 20s of books, rather than, I think about 11 we'll have by the end of the year all up. And for me, Trinity is really exciting. And it's really exciting because of its subject matter, not just the fact that it's a new venture in a new advanced set of books. It's the latest of a series of books, and we're well on our way, if we haven't already achieved that aim, of being the foremost systems engineering publisher in Europe. Now we might just think about it's global domination now, I think. Is that I spent the entirety of 2019 implementing MBSE into an organization that had never done systems engineering before. They'd never released a product before. They just come out of the University of Oxford. And so the book is a year too late for me, although much of this material in it I was fortunate enough to have been aware of at the time. So for me, this is a great event. I'm absolutely delighted to have been asked to give a few words for John and Simon, and I'll now introduce you. Well, they don't need really much of an introduction to the folk here. They're 2 of my greatest Incozy friends. They're my first Incozy friends. There may have been a drink or 2 involved in that. They are 2 of the, they're certainly outstanding in their field. Holt, Simon Perry.
Well, Ivan, thanks very much for the kind words. And yeah, so like I say, we're very excited. We're often used as the guinea pigs for the new book. So that's, like I say, hopefully this is a launch of a new series. And as Ivan said, we've got hopefully another 3 coming out, and I won't embarrass him by naming names, but there's one of the other authors who's here with us today, so hopefully we're going to see his 2nd publication later in the year, but we'll leave Paul to be anonymous. Okay, I don't want to embarrass him in some way. But yeah, so in fact, so Trinity, it's interesting because one of the things that some of you that have heard me talk before might have heard me say is, I mean, Simon and I were talking about this the other day, and we were saying it's interesting because each of us has been doing this for almost 30 years now, has been doing MBSE. And back when we started, and not we didn't start together, we probably started around about the same time, but sort of independently. it wasn't really called MBSE. It was just sort of that modelling thing. And those of you with a long memory in COSI will remember one of my greatest accolades was when Professor McPherson referred to me as that bloke that's always banging on about modelling in the nicest possible way. And so that was, and that's kind of where we sort of made my name. So Simon and I've been working together for almost 20 years now, I'd say. Well, my daughter's 20, so that's the sort of yardstick that we tend to use. So we've been working together, yeah, probably slightly over 20 years now. And it's interesting because if we go back to when we first started working, and the first COSI events I went to, the first one I went to was in 1999 in Brighton. And I know a few people on this call were actually at that event. It was the international, and it was held in Brighton on the south coast of the UK. And the problem that we used to have at conferences was convincing people that modelling was a good idea. And that was the argument we had. And then about 10 years ago, the argument changed from should you model to, well, how do we model effectively and efficiently? And interesting enough, in sort of the last 3 years, the question's kind of changed again. And now the question is more, well, how do we now actually do this for real in our organisation? Okay, so the questions are still there, don't get me wrong, but the sort of emphasis has kind of shifted. And I think this is a sign of the maturity of modelling as it gets more widely adopted. So anyway, so Simon and I, we spent the last 20 years together, and a large part of our work is actually helping organisations implement MBSE into their infrastructure, and we've learned a lot over the last 20 years. So really what Trinity is, it's just bringing together the techniques that we've developed, the experience that we've gained in doing that, things to do well, things that not to do because it won't turn out quite so well. We've seen a lot of different sort of successes and, you know, not quite so successful applications of MBSE in the past. We've had to clear up after a lot of failed MBSE implementation attempts by people. And so Trinity's really is bringing together, like I say, all our knowledge and experience of the last, like I say, almost 30 years each, and bringing it together in one publication. And it's exciting for us because we haven't written a book like this before. The others have been more, this is what modelling is all about. This is how the diagrams work. This is how you model this. This is how you model that. So this is kind of interesting for us. And as Ivan said, it's a first for our publishing, and it does, hopefully it's going to start a new era in the sort of things that we're doing. And so that's kind of the background from my point of view. So Simon, do you want to give us an overview of you know, your thoughts and the book and so on?
Yeah, I think you've pretty much summed all of it. I mean, for me, one of the beauties of having the opportunity to write this book is so many times on training courses or when we've been doing for consulting, people have actually, you know, asked that exact question. So yeah, okay, so you've shown me how to model, and I understand what a framework is, and I understand SysML, and we've got, but so to be able now to sort of turn around to people and say, you know, look, you know, there is an approach that works, but you do, you know, you absolutely have to be very clear about why you're doing things. You know, otherwise it is going to end in disaster. And I think that acknowledgement and that sort of realization that actually we need to show people how to understand what it is they want. You know, that as you know, John, that was the absolute seed of all this, because so often people just jump into doing MBSE, and it normally goes along the lines of, oh, we're going to implement MBSE, we've just spent £1 million on tool vendor X's SysML tool, but it's not made any difference. So, you know, to be able to actually step back and think, what is it that we have done and that with customers where it's been a success, and what things do you need to know? You know, I think that was it was a great opportunity for us to do that, and to be able to sort of distill that down into what 250 pages or so, you know, it was a really good opportunity. Yeah.
So, do you want to just say a few words about why we? Because as with most of the things that we do, we spend years doing all the work, and then we try and come up with a snappy name at the end. And so, do you want to just say a little bit about why it's called Trinity? And
Well, I flippantly called it Trinity, if you remember, at a meeting we had in Swansea when we were talking about it. But it's basically because when you are thinking about implementing MBSE into your organisation, or even helping somebody else introduce it, there are three things. There's a trinity of considerations that you have to really understand. You've got to understand the reason why you want to do MBSE in the first place, and then you have to understand your current capability, because you actually may have some. You may be surprised and find that you've actually got some capability. So you need to know what capability you've got and what capabilities you are going to need in the future to be able to meet those reasons that you've stated. And then the third sort of leg, if you like, of the Trinity, the third part of the Trinity, is understanding the evolution of MBSE then in your organisation. So how to take it from your current capability now to where you want to be in, whether it's 6 months, 5 years, or whatever. So those three things are all dependent on one another. So, we said, well, we've got three things. And I sort of rather flippantly said, well, let's just call it the Trinity then. And it's sort of stuck.
I like old Westerns, so it was ideal for me.
The Matrix came to mind to me.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, and the evolution's interesting as well, because there's some things that we've learned over the years, and and an important point to make is when we talk about MBSE, it's not just you do MBSE or you don't do. We've identified 5 different stages, and one of the points that we make is there's nothing whatsoever wrong with a document-based system, but depending on the complexity of the application, sometimes you might want to introduce more levels of rigor. And one of the points that we make there is one of the key features of an MBSE approach is where all the knowledge and where all the information regarding your system lives. And this is sort of often overlooked. And so when we have a document-based approach, that information lives in the documents. And when you have a model-based approach, all that information lives in the model. And so one of the key aspects to it is just the management of that information. And again, another key point is it's not, I think a big misconception and something that we talk about when you develop the model, it's not having as much information as possible in the model. It's having as much information as necessary in the model to get your job done, to develop the system. And I think that's something that's often overlooked, is that people think, no, we just got to add more and more. And then you get people saying, well, the model can never be complete. Well, no, of course it can't. So a model is a simplification. But what you need is enough information in the model to get your job done. And again, modeling is not the end point. It's a means to an end. And what we must always remember as systems engineers, to quote Nkosi, systems engineering is about realizing successful systems. That's our goal. And modeling is one way to do that. And as you say, and so the book's all about, well, how do we apply that? And how do you make this transition from having all of your information owned by documents, living in and owned by documents, spread across, a myriad different sources in some cases, to try and bring it together. And that's, I think that's an important point about it. And I think it sort of historically as well, Si, I think the evolution was the last prong to come together about sort of 5 or 6 years ago, wasn't it? And but it,
yeah, I don't think it was even that long actually, John. I think it was more recent than that. I think it was probably only about 3.
But as I say,
we did it whenever. I was just saying we did it whenever we had our big extravaganza.
I think that was one of the first
3 years ago.
That was, 2 or 3 years ago, wasn't it? Yeah. But it's but like I say, it's interesting. And we just reached a point where all of a sudden we were doing these things, and quite often the way that we write the books is we spend years doing them, and then all of a sudden it crystallizes. And like you're saying, that was the moment when you said, oh, we should call this Trinity, because we always do these 3 things, don't we? And sometimes it's just crystallizing them and formalize them in a little way, and that's really what it's all about. So that, and as Simon said, it's also the capability. And so, do you want to say a few words about the the other prong of the sort of why? Because I think that's such an important.
Well, yeah. I mean, I want to say a little bit about evolution as well that you've just touched on, and this whole thing about, more particularly the point you said about, models should contain the information that's necessary. You can be doing MBSC on the project and be modeling a very, very small part of that project. You might not need to do modeling on, if you're doing the second version of a system, for example, and you understand everything because you've been making that system for 30 years, but you're using one new bit of technology on it, there's no point modeling the stuff that's unchanged. You need to focus on that new bit of technology. And again, that is the mistake that sort of people make sometimes. Oh, for those of you that haven't seen, I'm wearing my corporate t-shirt today. The other two legs, the capability and the reasons. I'll just go back to capability before I talk about the reason. And I said that, an organization may find out that it's actually got more capability than it thinks. Often, the opposite can also be true as well. We've come across organizations that, well, we're big we do MBSC. And then when it's actually, there's 3 people in the 30,000 that do it, and their MBSE capability is a lot less than they think. So that can be interesting. It can be.
Right, I think Simon's breaking up a little bit, so I shall try and finish his sentence for him. Not that we've been working together for too long, but yeah, and it's one of the problems. So sometimes people underestimate where they are in terms of MBSE, but also often people will overestimate where they are with MBSE, and quite often it's kind of somewhere in the middle. So as I say, we have this sort of scale of 5 stages that we say is the sort of the evolution of MBSE, and we always say, well, you need to know where you are now, if you like, the as is, and you need to know the target stage that you want to be at, because what you also have to bear in mind is the sort of stage 5 true MBSE, the Nirvana-like stage. Many people don't need to get there, or don't want to get to that level of MBSE where everything is model based. It will be, as Simon says, some sort of hybrid, and that's fine as long as you're aware of the the limitations both of the modeling and of the sort of document based side of things, and it's making them work together. And I think that's very important. So how's your internet at the moment, Si? Are you able to speak again? Or
I don't know what the problem is. I don't know whether it's my extender in my office.
Okay. All right. Well,
It's on the sort of limit of my signal here, I think.
Okay. Do you want to say a few words about capability then? In that case,
you'll have to wave your hands like this if I suddenly cut out.
Okay.
Well, yeah. I mean, and a bit about the whole reason thing as well. Is that the reason and the capability? As systems engineers, we need to know why we do things when we're working on projects, and it's the same when we're undertaking the implementation of MBSE. As I say, many organisations start out on the MBSE path without knowing why they want to do it, what they want to get out of it. Which invariably leads to disaster. And on the capability side, as I say, you need to know where you are, because if you don't know what your current capability is, you don't know which areas that you need to put effort into. And you need to think, not only what's our current capability, where are we now, but where do we want to be to get to sort of the end of our sort of evolution. And as John has just said, it's not necessarily the case that you have to go, what we would call stage 5, full MBSE. I mean, we've got one of the case studies in the book is for a customer that was still going to be doing things largely model based, but they were putting in place an architecture framework for the systems that they were doing, and they were manually using that review process, but they had no intention to move over to a full MBSE sort of implementation. but they've managed to introduce rigor, admittedly, with a lot of manual effort in terms of reviewing, but everything that they do now on that project, it's to do with electrical networks on cars. Every review now is done against an architectural framework. So they started probably at what we would call stage 2, but they only wanted to go to stage 3, and they didn't want to go any further. So, and that they knew that right from the start. So in terms of the reasons sort of leg of the Trinity, they were very, very clear what they wanted right from day one. We want to start doing some MBSE, but essentially what we want to do is we want to put in place a framework and some processes and nothing more. So organizations don't have to go the whole the whole sort of journey, as it were.
Okay. All right, so thanks, Si. So hopefully that's given you a bit of an overview of what the book's about. So one of the aims of this session, and as we said, it's the first one that we've done, so it is a little bit of an experiment, is to sort of field questions from people as well. If anybody's got anything they'd like to know about the book, or wants to know any of our opinions on things, this is very much what we want this session to be. So so if anybody's got any questions, if you want to put your hand up, and we'll be happy to field some questions. So Paul, is that you with your hand up there? I saw you need to switch your microphone on, Paul. There we go.
I've got a couple of questions, but I want to give other people a chance first.
Right, okay. So basically, any other question? Oh, Alan, there we go.
Yeah, so you were just talking about sort of capability and maturing capability. Have you guys had a look at or got a view on the Nkosi model-based capability matrix, that work?
Yeah, and that's one of the things that we looked at, and yeah, we don't do it in exactly the same way. It's achieving the same the same end. So it's a different sort of technique to do it. But yeah, and they're certainly the two are certainly compatible. The way that we do it is the end result is far simpler, if you like, because we have. In fact, Si, did you manage to get the electronic copy of the book? Could you find the evolution picture, for example?
Yeah, 1 second.
So this is a sneak preview of the inside of the book as well. So our end result, so we assess things in a, if you like, a similar sort of way. We look at the different aspects, we look at the people, process, and tools, and so on. But one of the things that we aim to get, and we'll show you our evolutionary scale, as it were, which is based on.
I was going to say, is it 7 pictures of blokes, and it's.
Lego people, essentially.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we aim to do is, because again, quite often when we do this, the target audience that we're aiming at is higher level people, maybe without that much technical knowledge. So we stick with a nice simple graphic for the output. The work that goes into doing that is very in depth. So there we go. So can you zoom in on that a little bit? So there we can see the 5 stages of MBSE.
That coming through, okay.
So yeah, that's good. So stage 1, document based, and we have document centric, model enhanced, model centric, and model based. And what the graphic's showing there is is obviously the pile of documents, but very importantly, and this is the point we alluded to earlier, is what the documents is also representing, and what the graphic is representing at each stage is where the information and the knowledge lives. So as we see the model start to emerge in stage 3, that's representing a sharing of the ownership and the sort of residence of the information, and so on and so on. Now, when we get to stage 5, it doesn't mean that we'll never have documents again. What it actually means is that when we're at stage 5, we're viewing documents as just another view on the model. you know, and as long as it's consistent with all the other information, we couldn't care less if it's done in Microsoft Word or presented in a modeling tool or whatever, as long as that's a true view. So this is the output of it. The way that we actually go about doing that, and again, this is where we see similarities with the Nkosi framework, rather than having the matrix, as it were, we essentially run a group session using a thing called Ravens. And Ravens is, if anybody's ever seen it, it's almost like constructing a big jigsaw puzzle. We have these big physical pieces that we can connect together. And that allows us to visualize the, in fact, yeah, Simon's going to show some photos of that now. It allows us to visualize the, there we go, the current modeling situation. So basically, we've got the black triangle in the middle with corporate logo, obviously, and then the purple thing is tools, the blue is process, and the pink is people. And we use these three major branches as discussion points, and then each of the other pieces that gives us, it's not exactly the same, but Alan, if you can imagine like the matrix and the different cells on that, it's a similar sort of concept. But what we tend to do with this is, well, I'll say what we tend to do. What we used to do back in the old days is actually see people and gather around the table, and we'd literally construct what looks like a big jigsaw puzzle like this, and then we could put priorities on it. And on the basis of running this Ravens workshop, we were then able to ascertain where you are at the moment on the evolutionary scale, where you want to be, and also, sorry, if you could pull up MBSE in a slide, please. And also where you are in terms of your capability. So again, in terms of capability, the way that we do this, and this is certainly a graphic that many of you would have seen before, we have this thing called MBSE in a slide, which is the major elements you need to consider if you want to do MBSE. So again, if we can get those two graphics, and as part of the workshop, we can literally get people to draw on them on the basis of the Ravens discussion. Where do you think you are? That's how we visualize the output, if you like. And again, it's the way that we do this, the whole approach, Ravens, and what we're seeing here is modeling again. You know, it's not you know, forget this idea about all models. So, ironically, I appreciate the SysML on the screen at the moment, but you know, not all modeling is about SysML. The jigsaw pieces that we use are actually, that's just a different visualization. It's a different notation. The Lego person, that's actually just a different visualization of the underlying model. So what we're trying to do with these techniques, and so in fact, the team storming that you've been involved in, Alan, before on some of the sessions, it's the same there. It's just a different visualization, but there's there's a full model underneath it, and that's the thing that gives us the rigor. So Simon, do you want to, anything you want to add to that? I see you brought up.
Yes, a couple of things. First, on the Ravens side of things, John said, we use Ravens to help work out an organisation's capability.
Simon, what does Ravens stand for?
Review and I can't remember. Validation of enabling systems. It was such a contrived
what came first, the acronym or the
yeah, I mean, the important thing about those Raven sessions is actually, although we facilitate them, we don't build a picture up. We don't put the pieces down, and that's absolutely essential for doing this. We'll lay the three legs down. We might put a couple of pieces to how it works, but an organisation gets the best value there if they're standing around the table putting that on themselves rather than us asking questions and reflecting in the pieces what they've said. It's a lot more beneficial for an organisation for them to create that Raven sort of set themselves. And John was annotating the various diagrams. So the thing that's on screen at the moment, this is I keep getting things saying my internet is unstable, so I don't know whether you can hear me. So the thing on the screen is the MBSE. Is MBSE in a slide. This is the result, following the capability analysis for an organisation, highlighting, what they do and don't do and what they want. So for this organisation, they're concentrating on the 4 packages highlighted. They knew about standards, but they weren't going to particularly enforce conforming to them. They wanted a full architectural framework, etc. So, this starts to capture the required capabilities which have come off that sort of Ravens session. and then I just have to zoom a little bit. And then we take the evolution sheet and we mark that up as well. So here's their evolution. The vertical blue line is sort of where they are now. So the stuff down in the bottom left corner, that's essentially the capabilities that they have now. The stuff under the other stages are the capabilities from the other sheet, sort of fleshed out more and allocated to stages. And then we've got various activities across the top that they will need to do to move them through those stages. And again, those activities actually come out of the Ravens session, or as John's mentioned, something called Team Storm, which is another technique of ours. So those doing that initial Ravens session, and then doing other sessions with people and starting to identify the activities, essentially gets you to this point, so where you are, where you want to get to, and what activities that you need to do to get there. And it all just sort of falls out. And typically, I don't know what you think, John. I mean, probably depending on the size of the group that you're doing this for, it's possible to do it in half a day. It's possible to do it, in a day, 2 days. It just depends on the size of the group or the team. I mean, I've done this with, with some organisations where it's been for a very specific project, a very specific team. And yeah, we might have done this over a few weeks, but in terms of man hours or person hours, it is probably no more than a day, and probably 5 or 6 hours probably to get here.
And I think that's what you're saying is so important, because you've got to get the involvement in people, and like you say, Si, and it's going well when we can just take a step back and everybody's fighting over the pieces and putting them on and so on, because you have to get the buy-in from people, and I think that's very important, and that's something that people often overlook. So, and we've tried many techniques over the years, but we found that the more technical looking, so the perception of how technical a technique is sort of inversely proportional to how successful it is, and the less technical it looks, and the more it looks like Lego people or jigsaw pieces on the table, the more people will engage with it. And I think that's something we've learned over the years. Okay, so very good. Hopefully that's answered your question.
That's great. It brings to life what's on screen, and I can see the relationship between the two, because certainly that matrix isn't perfect, but it's pretty decent. I can see how they're complementary. Cheers. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. So we got Mike. Mike, you've got your hand up. Mike,
yes, I do. Hey, let me just say, you guys make me laugh. Yeah, you're funny. You're really good, and I'm really glad that it's come where this book has come out. And I'll tell you, because the recent RIG and TWG type webinars we've been having, this issue of organizational maturity to be able to tackle some of these projects and to be able to upgrade to do this has really been a big challenge. And we're looking at several sessions or presentations to address that kind of thing, and modeling. So for this book, you addressed how maybe an organization might be able to assess, in terms of people, process, and tools, where they are and where they want to grow. So you've had some experience with that, actually using it as a way to assess organizations.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I say, and with all the techniques that we develop, they're born out of frustration a lot of the time, because we would go to people and have a meeting, and we thought it had gone really well, and at the end they'll just say, "Well, you tell us what to do," and we just go, "Yeah, but we don't know where you are and where." And it's like, how do we get them to vision? And no amount of drawing on the board is gonna. And we sat up in Simon's place in Wolverhampton, weren't we? And it was like, if we had some sort of jigsaw puzzle, and then we sat down and sort of created this Ravens idea. And the first version was actually just printed out on paper. And then Simon, God bless him, cut out the whole thing by hand using a scalpel, two entire of these Raven sets. And then we kind of play tested it, and we went to some friendly clients and tried it out on them. And eventually, so the pieces that you see there are like big, thick plastic pieces, and they're the sets that we've got sort of printed up now that we use. And in fact, in the appendix, you can sort of photocopy and what we call it, print and play the things.
Yeah,
but we use these ravens, we use for real, you know, when we're going into organizations, and it's turned out to be very, very powerful, and it always gets a good response. But very importantly, it's getting that engagement, Mike, is what's is really crucial to the success, because you have to get the buy-in from people. And when you do come up with a strategy, if people can look at part of it and point and say, yeah, that was my part there. I remember being in the meeting and putting that piece in and writing this on it and so on. That's, I think from a human point of view, that's very, very important. And one of the things that I think we've learned over the years, I know, Mike, we've probably spoken about this before, but is the most difficult challenge you got is not the technical challenge of the modelling, it's the getting the buy-in, it's the people side of things, you know, and getting them to see what are the benefits, and so, or what benefits would you like to get from it, and use those as the target. So, yeah, absolutely. So,
I like that. I'm not sure this is out of place, but we're willing to have you guys on a webinar sometime. And it's not just the rig, but it touches America with the TWG and APTA and the US. So you can get some real wide coverage if you're interested.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you know, I don't need to ask twice to stand up and show off.
Simon as well. It's a double act, right? Okay. Hey, thank you.
Yeah, I'm the straight man.
Yeah, well, I nod my head. You hit it. So. Okay, so we've got any more questions from the floor then before we hand over to Paul? So,
I mean, the questions can be about the technique. They can be about how we go about writing books. They can be anything, you know. It's
yeah. So let's
treat this as an.
Paul's got. I know he's got a couple of questions. You want to unmute Paul and then give us your first.
Okay.
I shall stop sharing my screen. 1 second.
Why not?
There we go. Thanks, Si.
Okay, so the first question is a bit of a technical challenge, and I've got to admit at this point that I haven't bought the book, let alone read it. So the answer may be in the book, but if whether it is or whether it isn't, I'd like you to respond. So I remember a conversation with the technical director I worked for at the time, about 8 years ago. And in response to a challenge, he said, everything we do is model-based. Okay? But we're talking different languages here, because the model-based approach that we took, which I'm sure is common to Alan's industry as well, is that you know what your key performance parameters are. And they're going to be, well, in the sensor field, big things like sensitivity, dynamic range, cybersecurity integrity, whole system throughput, safety analysis, intrinsic reliability, and logistic availability. Okay, so they're all emergent properties. They have their own sets of mathematics, which are highly non-linear between the components and the outside world. You probably could embed that in a SysML framework, but it's not the most efficient way of doing it. Actually, if you're going to do your structural and functional modeling in SysML and an architectural framework, the trick is, how do you do the semantic linking between your physics-based modeling and your SysML objects?
Right.
So where do you draw the boundary of what is included in model-based engineering? And a supplementary question is, how did you decide, I'm sure you know all that, what to include in the book and what to exclude?
Right, I think to take your points, because I'm going to hand to Simon to talk about a specific thing that he's working on at the moment. So Simon, you've got to be thinking now, how do you sanitize that so that we don't end up in prison when I ask you to talk about your current project? But the first thing is almost a minor clarification on what you're saying. Forget about SysML, okay? It's not MBSE in SysML, mathematics modeling is a different world. It isn't, okay? MBSE encompasses, and I appreciate you use the word model-based engineering as well, which tends to be the simulation, the electrical diagrams, the heat flow diagrams, and so on. So when we talk about the framework that we have to have in place, that encompasses all of those different types of modeling, okay? Yes. It just happens that when we define the framework, we use a modeling notation, for example, SysML, to do that.
Yeah.
But the use of SysML is almost irrelevant. You use whatever notation is appropriate. So coming back to your first point, Paul, yeah, you use, if it's mathematics you want to do. So for example, if it's what we would refer to as parameter based, if there's numbers involved, if it's performance, yeah, it's mathematics every step of the way. If it's operational based, where it's actually this particular sequence of events needs to happen, we'll use more of a visual technique, such as sequence diagram based scenarios, for example. So first of all, yeah, we're not precluding the use of any particular modeling technique. We use whatever's appropriate to actually convey the information to get the job done. But the architectural framework must take into account all of those different modeling techniques. Okay. We can give you a real example now. So Simon, can you say a few very careful words? Because I think this touches on what Paul said about the project you're working on.
I will, but before I do, I just want to, I mean, Paul says he hasn't seen the book. I mean, it's important to understand this book is not a book about modeling. This book is not a book about SysML. It's not a book about simulation. This book is about how an organization can understand what it wants out of MBSC, whatever it perceives MBSC to be. It's about how they can identify what they want to get out of it, what they can do now, what they need to do in the future, and what actions they need to take to get there. So, I mean, this book could be called, implementing new business processes. Almost. This book is basically about, identifying where you are, where you want to get business. It's about business change. So this book itself is actually nothing to do with MBSC directly. It's nothing to do with SysML. It's nothing to do with modeling. It's essentially, it's about how you bring about business change. And it happens to be the change that we focus on is bringing MBSE into your organization. So that's an important thing for people to understand. But in terms of we talk about having a framework in place. I'm working on a project at the moment where I'm developing a simulator for satellites, and it simulates the orbits of satellites. It simulates the location of ground stations and observation locations, places that you want to task the satellite to go and take an image of. And it allows scientists that are using it to define multiple sort of configurations with different satellites in different orbits with different types of sensors, and it allows them to play around with where the ground stations are. And ultimately, the output of this model is going to be used to, and I can say this, to inform the UK's defence in the future. It's actually being used by some very, very high up people in the RAF to plan what satellites they're going to need and where they're going to need new ground stations in the future. And the nature of that simulator.
Yeah, I mean, the maths involved in that is
it's very mathematical. It's all maths. You're working out all bits of things. I learnt a new word in August last year, orbitology.
Orbitology turns out to be a thing.
Yeah. So, yeah, and I now know all about orbitology. So, so my simulator takes the 6 standard parameters for a satellite's orbit, and then you have to derive a number of parameters, and then every time interval it has to. It's relatively straightforward maths, but there's a lot of it, and there's a lot of matrix transformations to change coordinates from Earth-centered inertial to Earth-facing and all this kind of stuff. So basically, it's a whole load of mathematics in there. Okay. Now, so I'm implementing that in software, but I'm still modeling some of it in SysML. Now, I'm not modeling all of the mathematical parts in SysML. There's no point in doing that. It doesn't give me anything. But I'm still creating views in my SysML model, or I'm defining viewpoints, I should say, in my architecture framework that says, I need to be able to, specify the mathematics for this. I need to understand, which sort of conceptual elements, satellites, their orbits, the sensors in my software, how they're going to behave. So I'm still producing a view in our language of the behavior, but that view happens to be, some software and comments and technical notes. I'm not modeling any of the software in SysML because it's pointless. It doesn't give me anything. But I'm still working to a framework. Yeah, go on,
and
John.
that's the key point there. The framework encompasses like you say, what we would refer to as like the operational views. This is how you use it. This is a sequence of events that happens. But the vast majority are the performance type views, which are mathematically based, but they're all encompassed within the same framework. And that's one of the key aspects to MBSE, is having that framework in place that guarantees that all of the information, whether it's an electrical wiring diagram, whether it's mathematical simulation, whether it's visual SysML, whether it's formal methods, whatever it's going to be, whether it's rich picture graphics, that all that information in all those different formats is consistent with one another. And that's one of the things that the framework gives you.
Well, I completely agree with you. Would you accept that, not with us because we're smarter than that, but in COSI at the international level, there is a perception that MBSE is just about SysML?
Oh yeah, and it's a misconception.
Well, in terms of not what the book says, but how it is perceived.
Yeah, and to my mind, that's one of the biggest battles that we have. And in fact, that was one of the origins of the first Don't Panic guide. And that's why we got, and Paul, you'll know, we got like the myths section in there as well, and the pitfalls and so on. And that's exactly why we introduced that. And one of the big myths that we have in there is it literally says MBSE does not equal, so the mathematical sign, SysML.
Oh,
and
I'm planning on writing a paper with exactly that title, so great.
yeah. So but you're right, and it is a problem, but it's a perception problem. And that's what we're constantly fighting against, and that's why the MBSE in the slide that we show, that's why that's so important, because then that makes the point that yes, visualization is important and is essential, but that's one part.
I don't know whether anybody can. I don't think it'll. I don't think it'll focus on the offending.
It's one part of MBSE. There's lots of other parts. So we got another hand up. So if you don't mind, Paul, I'm going to switch over to Alessandro. There you are. Would you like to unmute and ask us your question, please?
Yes. Yeah, thank you for the presentation. I work for Airbus, and since I started, you get tossed into an organization that relies heavily on models. They say, okay, this is your 3-element model of the airplane. This is your digital twin, and that's how you use it. But you don't necessarily understand the whole ecosystem around it. It's like, what was the idea behind the framework? Yeah? What was what you want to achieve with it? It's like, okay, you are a technical person, structural engineer. Use the model, get the results, and that's it. But don't, but that makes it difficult when you want to try to improve it, because you don't know the whole what's around it. How it was conceived. Well, what I want to get with that? Does the book actually present examples from different industries and different type of models? And also, since I'm writing a book on sort of systems engineering connected with the neural networks, how far can we go by presenting our own experience from industry in a book without getting into trouble?
Well, quite a few questions there. Let's answer the last one first. So, Alessandro, for people, I'm trying to persuade Alessandro to write a Don't Panic guide as well at the moment. So this is probably why some of these are sort of book-related questions. As to how far you can push what you can put in the book without getting into trouble, this is quite a big issue. We often have this, but as I say, because Simon and I have both published quite a few books before, it's a sort of fine line. So we have to make sure that whatever we publish is our sort of material, if you like. It's our intellectual property, and of course once it gets published it then becomes Incozy UK's intellectual property essentially. But no, you do need to be careful, and that's why, for example, when we do the case studies in the books, they're all anonymized, if that's the right word. So we have to make them all anonymous, so we can't, so all we can say, like Simon just said, it's an automotive company, a big automotive company, and that's about all we can say. You know, a big defense company, a small medical devices company, and that. And in fact, it's one of the, so Ivan mentioned at the beginning that we've got another Don't Panic book that's already to have the button pressed and go to the printers, and we're still waiting. All we wait on now is the final approval from one of the authors' organisations. We're fortunate, Simon and I, in that we work for a very small company and we're both directors of that company. So getting permission for Scarecrow's IPR isn't a problem for us. But of course, you work in a big multinational, you work in Airbus or BAE or Thales or, you know, someone like that, it's a lot more difficult, and that's very important. And in fact, it's one of the headaches that we'll have, and Alan and Ivan will know all about this as past presidents of Incozy UK, and Alan at the international level, the whole issue of IPR and getting people to collaborate, even in working groups, you know, and can we put that into a 2-page Z guide, you know? So Alan, do you want to say a couple of words on that?
Yeah, I think the most important lesson there is have the chat about intellectual property before you do the work.
Yes.
If we've all had a lovely chat here and come out with a really great view and then say, who owns it, you're stuck. You have to chat up front, and so everyone's got in their head what is company background, what is stuff they're choosing to release via a company authorization thing, and what is just your own understanding of systems engineering process and the like. But yeah, have the conversation up front and be very clear also about why you're doing what you're doing. So in Cozy Central has a thing called a technical product plan, a TPP. We did a lot of work on that, and I know Incozy UK is something similar about what you're doing, what's the purpose, is it for sale, is it for members, what about intellectual property? Do that thinking up front, even if it's quite quick. Say, yeah, that's fine, that's fine, that's fine. Ooh, that's a gotcha, because then having that conversation at that point saves a whole lot of grief and a whole lot of frustration, because you might have done some great work together, but then you're a little bit stuck. So that would be my experience.
Yeah, no, it's good.
I think as well, if you're going to write a book like the Trinity book, we have 4 case studies in there. So, you know, that is particularly where we're referring to stuff that was done in customers of ours. You absolutely do have to make sure that you've anonymized it. And actually, in some cases, you can go as far as change that we haven't actually done that. You know, the one in there that I say is an automotive company was an automotive company, but I could have said it was a plane manufacturer, and the stuff would have applied as well. So it is a really fine line. And as Alan said, and as John said, you know, it's about, are you about, you know, your ideas and your concepts, or are you just republishing something that's been done sort of in-house within a company? And then that gets a lot more problematic.
And I think it's less of an issue with something like a Don't Panic guide, because the very nature of it's a very high level. It's for interest, you know, you're not going into that much detail on specific techniques. It's at a very high level. Whereas, like I say, this new series that we do in the advanced applications, obviously there's a lot more detail in there. You have to be a lot more careful. So Paul, I can see you got your hand up. So I know Paul's been through this process, because as you know, Paul wrote the interfaces book. So Paul, do you want to unmute and?
Yeah, so I'm just reinforcing what you just said. Yeah, there were a couple of IPR issues, but we got through that. The point about the Don't Panic books is that you've got a very limited page count, 56 pages, give or take. Typically, that's hard to write, because typically what you want to write is going to come in at about 100 pages. So you actually have to work out what to leave out. It's pretty unlikely that you're going to have room for a proper case study.
Yeah.
So, and as John says, it has to be fairly high level and therefore easy to anonymize. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. But that leads me on to my second question, if I may, which is, what do you see as the philosophical difference? How do you decide, oh yes, this subject matter should be a don't panic, and this subject matter should be an advanced, what do you call them? Advanced topics?
It's called advanced applications of systems engineering. Well, there's a few sort of answers to that. So to my mind, the reason why we wrote the first Don't Panic is we got a book that we call The Monster, which some of you are familiar with, which is 1,000 pages long, and it's our big, all the real nitty gritty detail of MBSE. And people were saying, yeah, that's great, but I can't show that to my boss. I need something that's a lot more accessible, that, you know, essentially I can let my boss color in the drawings in it, essentially. So that was kind of the origin of the Don't Panic, is no, we want something that's basically very lightweight, that's cheap, and if you want to know a little bit about the subject, yeah, hand that over. And ideally a non-expert should be, you know, obviously probably with some technical background, but certainly a non-expert in the field should be able to pick it up and get a good appreciation for what that's all about. And as you say, Paul, there's not really room for big case studies or anything like that, or really that much detail on specific techniques. And I think when you write the Don't Panics, you hit the nail on the head. The most difficult thing is, well, what do I leave out? Because it is difficult. And that was a very conscious decision. Limit the actual content to 55 pages, because it is easy to go on. So, and so if people want to do, look, this is a specific technique, this is how you do it, this is how you apply it, and back it up with case studies and so on, that's very much what the advanced applications is all about. So advanced applications, you should be able to pick up the book, go to work, and actually start to apply the techniques. Whereas I think a Don't Panic is more about, I might be interested in this subject, what's in it, you know, is there anything in it for me? So it's a sort of toe in the water, and I think that's the main difference. So when we do it, the way it happens, so for any budding authors out there, is, and you have to bear in mind, we're new to publishing as well. So Paul's been very patient with us, because he actually put in another proposal, I won't say how long ago, but a while back, and we're now at the point where we're confident enough, we're going through the next slew of books. And so Paul's proposal is now going through that process again, which is excellent. And this is why, as Ivan said, we'll hopefully have another 3 out this year that we've got the current raft of proposals on. So it goes to 3 reviews. First of all, I look at it and say, is this sensible? Does it fit within Incosi UK's remit? It then goes out to 3 reviewers who have got expertise in the area. It's single blind, so the author doesn't know who the reviewers are, but obviously the reviewers have to know who the author is one of the criteria is this person respected in the field? And that's very important for these Don't Panic guides, because you want to be taking your advice from, you want good provenance for it. So, you know, if we can butter up Paul a little bit here, people see Paul's name on the front of a book and they go, yeah, he knows what he's talking about. Okay. And that's what we're looking for there. We're also looking for sort of players as well, you know, so people have got the recognition that are names. And so that's one of the facts. So it goes to the 3 reviewers. They'll come back and say, yes, we think this should be developed into a full book. And they'll have suggestions and, you know, things that they like and didn't like, suggestions and that sort of thing. They've also got the ability to can it at that point. So there is a scoring system, and below a certain threshold, we won't publish. There's a middle threshold, which is we will with some changes. And then the top level is, yes, it's great, go for it. But then it goes to our series editor, which happens to be Simon. And then Simon then makes the decision, is this, I guess it's kind of, is it the right moment to publish this in the series, if you see what I mean? So, you know, is it the right time? And so do you want to just say a couple of words? You've only got a minute or so left, so you just want to finish off and say a couple of words about, you know, when you look at a Don't Panic book with your series editor hat on, what are you looking for?
Yeah, well, by the time it's got to me, as John has said, it will have gone through the technical, you know, the initial technical reviews, and the decision will be, yeah, we think this is a good idea. So it's really a sort of sanity check that I do at that point to go, okay, now which books have we already got? Which ones do we know that are coming up? It's also a little bit about sort of, looking across sort of Incosi and things that have come up maybe at the last ASEC or whatever, and to see, is this a topic that's of interest to people at the moment? If there are lots of presentations on, I don't know, neural networks or artificial intelligence or whatever, then what's the word? The zeitgeist. It's the time to sort of to jump onto that. So, I mean, we've never turned a book down at that stage yet.
No, we've turned them down at the technical stage.
We've turned them down. We've turned them down at the technical stage. A good
example of this now, Si, is if somebody put forward a book on architectures and it got through the technical review, it probably wouldn't get past Simon now, because we've just published 2 Don't Panics, one on architecting and one on architectural frameworks. So the time probably wouldn't be right for that. As it happens in the next slew of books, we got, and that worked very well, I think, having the 2 being developed at the same time, didn't it? Because it was 2 slightly different aspects of a similar field. And we're hopefully going to have that in the next slew as well. Because we've got 2, again, same area, but different takes on things. And I think that's interesting. But sorry, Si.
I mean, my other role as series editor, once the writing's all kicked off and coming to the end, is that I'm the person that makes sure that all of the books in the series look the same and have the same kind of look and feel to them. So all of the Don't Panics, for example, they all have. I haven't got a copy of yours here, Paul. I'm still waiting for it to, so they.
Yep, there we go.
Colour. There's which one's that? Is that James's or?
The red one, yeah. Paul's is blue, isn't it?
Yeah, yours is blue, isn't it, Paul? Your one.
You've got your one there, Paul. Hold that up. Do a quick advert.
Yeah, so it's my job as series editor to make sure that all of the formatting. I essentially do all of the final proofing and type checking and copy proofing. And all of the layout and we do all of the sort of covers and whatever, and then liaise with sort of Incosi to get them published. So as John said, sort of my role as series editor is the sort of the final sanity check. Okay, and it might be that we get through a technical check, as John said, and it might not be a Don't Panic. It could be an advanced book. If I had the results of a technical review tomorrow that said somebody wants to do an advanced applications book on architecting, then as John said, we probably wouldn't go for that this year. We'd say yes, but let's do it in a year or 2 years, because we've just had the Don't Panic. So it's about sort of keeping an eye on what Incosi is publishing, and as I say, then making sure that the look and feel is all consistent, so that all of the books are the same format, roughly the same page count, and that the feel of the books is the same as well.
And I was going to say, Simon, what we want is very much. So we look at Mike's background now, and we see his shelves with all the books on and so on. And we judge you by that, Mike, by the way. But what we want to see in a few years' time is the Incosi shelf. And just by looking at it, without even seeing the titles, you'll go, they're the Incosi UK books. Because they'll have the same look and feel, and it'll look like a library. There we go. Alan's just got it on the act as well. But it'll look, and you'll know just by looking at the cover, that's an Incosi UK book, and it's going to be good. And that's where we want to be, isn't it, size, to have that sort of iconic imagery on the cover. And that's why the covers all look the same with the different colors on. We want people to recognize them from a distance. So you could look at Paul's one or our one or the architecting one or the architecture framework one, and even without reading any of the text on it, you'd go, that's a Don't Panic guide. And that's what we're looking for, is that recognition. And it's going to be the same with the advanced applications. We're going to have the same look and feel of the covers, different colors again. But we want them to be visually striking as well. And we want them to be iconic and recognizable. And I think that's an important thing. We're very fortunate in Incosi UK that we've got an excellent pool of resources. The members, the expertise we've got in our members, like I say, the current authors we've got, the upcoming authors we've got are outstanding. And we're very lucky that because we're small, we've got a lot more control. And Simon and I can tell you for hours and hours the problems we have with publishers and book covers and what they want to have on the cover and what we've got a lot of control. Well, we've got absolute control over that, so we can get it looking really, really nice. The other advantage we got is because the books, so for example, we publish with the IET, they will print 1,000 books and put them in a warehouse, and that won't change until 6 or 7 years later, where it's either decommissioned or we do a new edition. Because we've got a very completely different business model for printing, a very, much more up-to-date one. And that's something that Simon and I have been able to bring to the party, is our experience of publishing and being very, very frustrated as authors. Paul, you think you've been frustrated with publisher, go and publish for the IET and you'll never complain again about the way that we do things. But no, joking there, obviously the IET are wonderful. Live, you say? Okay. But what we're able to do, we got that control over it, and because it's print on demand, we're able to change them as well. So, for example, Paul's book now, if you buy a copy of Paul's book now, inside the front cover, it will be different, because when Paul wrote his original book, it said also in the series, "Don't panic, MBSE." If you buy your copy now, Paul, it will say also in the series, MBSE, architecture frameworks. And so we're able to actually update the books as we go along. And likewise, all the other books have now got all the up-to-date book lists in the front. So and Paul, I'm sure you've seen this, the second you get the book in your hand and you go, oh, it's like a newborn baby. And then it's like you realize the baby's got 3 legs. You open the book and go, oh my God, there's a typo there. The first thing you see, there's a typo. We can correct that, and then, very quickly, and then all the subsequent copies that are then printed and sold, it will be corrected. So we've got a lot more control over the whole publishing process, and that's very, very important for us. But that's because we're small and we've been able to bring almost like all our frustrations into the vision of where we want the publishing to be. So yeah, but there we go. So anyway, we've gone slightly over, we've gone 10 minutes over. So, I mean, we could keep going all afternoon, but we mustn't. And so that really concludes it. So, I mean, from my point of view, I'd like to say thank you. And I'll get Ivan to say a couple of words to close. Any Ivan still with us, or is he dashed off?
I think he had to shoot off.
I think he had another call, didn't he? So, well, I'll tell you what, I'll get Alan to say a few words. How about that? I'll put him on the spot. Well, from my point of view, thanks for getting involved, everyone. So, Simon, do you want to say a quick word before we ask Alan to close down?
Yeah, thanks everyone. We'd encourage you, if you've got ideas for either a Don't Panic book or an advanced applications book, get in contact with Incozy and get your proposal in. We're looking for new authors all the time. We don't want it to be just me, John, and Paul.
Yeah, we like the Beatles.
You're looking for a bloke called Ringo or a lady called Ringo. Yeah, really, I think you'll be a really good session. I think it's a really nice idea to be able to, have a bit of a fluff piece about the book, but also talk more about the process. You were talking about, I think Paul asked about the levels. It strikes me that the Don't Panics are probably at the awareness level.
Yes.
And that the
competency framework,
beautiful Arsenal Red, which is nice, books are probably aimed towards the practitioner level, aren't they? If you wanted to judge it that way. No, I think
I don't agree. I think Don't Panic is at the supervised practitioner level. So
right.
I think it should teach you about how to do the basics of what's going to really make a difference to your day job. It really needs to convey that.
I'll take that. Even better. So I think it's a great initiative. I've got most of them already, including, I always thought it was the Beast, not the Monster, the big book.
Call it, as long as you buy it, Alan, we don't care what you call it. So.
I'd lost it yesterday and I had to find it. It was
how can you lose it?
But yeah, no, it's a really good initiative. As you say, becoming the I guess the foremost in terms of publishing books actually relevant to systems engineers. That's the key, rather than.
I mean, at the moment, to be honest, we can only make that claim on terms of the numbers of publications we've got, because we can't really quantify the quality at the moment. But I'd like to think the quality as well. But certainly in terms of numbers, Smeaton's had enough. What are you doing? So.
Awesome. But yeah, no, really good, enjoyable, informative session. So thanks very much, and thanks to Ivan for opening and he's off earning a crust somewhere.